Kent Alberty is going to kick it off for us. So, Kent, I'll hand you this microphone. We do need you to use the microphones because this is being, is it live streamed, Deanne? Okay.
It's not, that one's not going to work. Sorry.
Well, I didn't really prepare a speech for this. That's not what you're here for. What I want to do is thank all of you for your commitment to the Sioux Falls Public Schools. We share that commitment. As a longtime member of the school board, I have watched how our community has made the commitment to our public schools. I appreciate that. Many of you I know for a long time and appreciate you agreeing to be part of this task force. And what I get to do on the front end of this is sit back and observe and find out how well you work, and I look forward to what you bring to the school board for us to consider in June or July. So again, thank you, and I'm going to sit down and let you all begin your work.
We are a big group, so we're going to start with introductions because not everyone will know each other. I'm Vernon Brown. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at SDN Communications. I'm a former city councilor, a former reporter, but most importantly, I'm a husband to my wife, Tammy, who's an English teacher at Washington High School, and father to my daughter, Emma, who is a Patrick Henry Middle School 8th grader. So as we go around the room, we also want to be able to get a perspective of why you are here. So I'd ask you to talk about, very briefly, because there's a lot of us, why we're involved here, and then the results that you'd like to see from this work. For me, public education is very important in our household. It's talked about every day at the dinner table. And my wife and I are products of public education. Both grew up in the 80s in the farm crisis, and our teachers never looked at us in terms of our economics of our families. They looked at us and gave us opportunities. And so that's why we are so passionate about public education. So the results I hope for here, equity, opportunities for children in a comfortable facility that will serve us for many years ahead.
Thanks, Vernon. I'm Nan Baker. I've lived in Sioux Falls for about 20 years. My husband and I are currently raising 4 children. So we have the high school level taken care of, middle school level, and elementary school level covered. I have been volunteering for the Sioux Falls School District for 10 years consecutively. I'm also a substitute school teacher. I'm delighted to be working with all of you on the important work that we're going to do. Before we continue to do introductions, I have a couple housekeeping items to talk about. We already covered the microphone. The second piece, if you need a beverage or refreshment, we have those just down the hallway straight into the room. You'll be able to see it because it's there's glass doors in front. Number 2, Vernon is going to help to facilitate our conversations after we have our various guests speak. My role is helping to keep us on task, and we have a lot of us, and what is important to us is that you feel heard. So if at any time I interrupt you because of time and keeping things flowing, and you have a question or a comment that you feel needs to be heard, we want it to be, please go to the parking lot in the back and jot it down. So those questions, comments, thoughts will be looked at, and then we can either address them later in the evening or at our next meeting. Bathrooms are also right down the hall. Excellent, so we'll just keep going. With that, we just have a lot of you here. You're all coming with a different lens, a unique perspective, and we're just really excited that you're giving up your time for this important work. Briefly introduce yourself, and you've already stated why you want to be here, but maybe just do that again. I know you turned that in to Deanne earlier, but just maybe restate that and just share what you would like to share to the group about yourself.
I'm Katrina McKinney. I have a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old. I live just a block from downtown, and I'm president of All Saints Neighborhood Association, which is the neighborhood directly south of downtown. which is probably one reason why maybe I'm here, why I was asked to be here. My 10-year-old goes to Eugene Field A+, which is an arts-based education school. I am also very passionate about public school because I feel that it's important for all of us to have a great education, no matter what walk of life we come from. So I'm just excited to be here, part of the conversation.
Tom Verhey, task force member. Trying to think what I put on my paperwork. I live on the west side. I work here in Sioux Falls in the financial services industry. I've got 4 boys. One graduated Roosevelt, one graduated New Tech, and I've got 2 in Pettigrew. And then my wife and I graduated Roosevelt a long time ago. I was the 2nd class, my wife was the 3rd class. So we've seen the school evolve over the years and kind of grow like a bloated tick on the school population. It's massive now. So, yeah, just very, I kind of really just, my wife grew up on the west side. We started dating in high school, and so I'm very familiar with the west side of high school, or the west side schools, and that's why I'm here.
My name is Dave Dantzler. I've been in Sioux Falls since 1980. The reason why I'm in this room, I think someone that I know nominated me for this, so if I ever find him, maybe I'll thank him. I'm not sure yet. We'll see how this goes. It's certainly a viable, necessary thing that we try to figure out what we're doing and how we do it with public education and our kiddos. I've been a soccer coach for 30 years or 35 years or something like that. I currently coach club and I coach varsity boys at Washington. I've been involved in the finance industry for 35 years, so that's what brings me here.
Cathy Clark. I was in financial services for 37 years and retired last June. And I think they've probably the same person mentioned both of us. But I consider it a privilege to be a part of this committee, to learn and meet other people in the community. And I've had the opportunity to do some substitute teaching, as my mom taught for over 40 years and a sister that taught for over 35 years. I wanted to understand what our community was all about and what our children were facing in the classroom, because I was quite naive. You think and you hear things, but until you're in the middle of it all, you really don't know. And so teaching 26 kindergartners one day at Pettigrew, and then a resource person over at McGovern, just totally scratches the surface. And what a wonderful opportunity to give some input and to hear what our community has to say in taking care of our greatest asset, our children, and the teachers of the school district and those that serve. It's a wonderful thing that we have.
Hi, I'm Carrie Key. I have 2 kiddos in the public school system. Both go to Sonia Sotomayor, the Spanish immersion school. So they are a 4th grader and a 3rd grader. I'm here more as a parent, view from it. I live on the central part of town, and just excited to be part of the conversation and talk about different ways that we're learning and how our schools are built for different successes that way.
I'm Sharon Schultz-Elsing. I'm pretty sure I'm here mostly as a parent. I've been a community volunteer and a school volunteer since my 17-year-old started school. And I have a 14-year-old who's come up through Oscar Howe, the Challenge Center at Garfield, and is at Edison Honors now, and will be open enrolling at Lincoln in the fall to stay with her good group of friends. My 17-year-old will be graduating next year from Roosevelt, so I've had the experience with the crowding over there too, and came up through Memorial, which is the same sort of issue over there. I'm here because I am very excited about this collaboration with the community and stakeholders to make sure that all of the children in Sioux Falls have the best possible shot at education, that we're giving our educators the tools that they need as far as facilities are to help make that happen.
Hi, I'm Theron McChesney. I'm a product of the Sioux Falls School District. I actually grew up here in Sioux Falls, went through Cleveland Elementary, Whittier Middle School, and the new Washington. So I was part of that same split in '94, or '92, '93. I am here today as a parent of 3 young children, 2 of which one is in first grade, one is in pre-K at Sonia Sotomayor, and the other is only 2, so she has a few years to go yet. But I'm very interested in how this turns out in terms of how Sioux Falls is growing, and wanted to be able to bring that perspective of both parent, student, and having experienced that.
Hi, I'm Madsen, and I'm a student at Lincoln High School. And although I'm a senior at Lincoln, I'm still very invested in this whole process, just because Lincoln and the Sioux Falls School District will always kind of be my home. And so I'm very invested in the success.
Hi, I'm Deb Kowski. My husband Sheldon and I have 2 kids in the public school system, a freshman at Lincoln and a 5th grader at the Challenge Center. And I'm here both as a parent and as a community volunteer. I also chair Sioux Falls Thrive, which is a new nonprofit that is, our goal is to look at kids and make sure they're successful from cradle to career. And I'm also on the board of the Sioux Falls Public Schools Education Foundation, which champions teachers and what they do for our school district. Myself personally, I've been absolutely blown away by the education my kids have gotten in the Sioux Falls public school system. They've both gone through specialized programs, which I have paid nothing extra for. The teachers have all, with no exception, been just talented and passionate and just done an amazing job. And I think we have something really special here in Sioux Falls. A lot of you probably know that if you talk to your friends around the country. I don't know if anybody saw the New York Times article that just came out today about the state of our education system across the country. I have a sister-in-law who teaches in a rural school in South Dakota. They have 10-year-old science textbooks, similar to what I read in this article. I don't think Sioux Falls has that, but we do have a bit of a space issue, so I'm here to help try to solve that problem.
Hello, I'm Mike Cooper, and I'm representing the City of Sioux Falls. I'm the Director of Planning and Building Services. I went to Lincoln Elementary School, which is no longer here, Whittier, and Lincoln High School. And I have a son and daughter that both went to Cleveland, Whittier, and Washington High. And over the years, I've been involved in some of the previous school board initiatives looking at our capital facilities needs, future planning needs, and I'm really excited about participating in this latest process, not only as a resource, but also maybe providing some input as far as how our decisions are going to impact the overall growth and development of the city of Sioux Falls, and vice versa, how the future development of the city is going to impact the Sioux Falls School District. So look forward to having more discussions with all of you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Stokes. I am mainly here as a parent, I guess. I have 2 kids. One will be going, they're both at Pettigrew right now. One will go to Memorial next year, which scares me. It's a big school. We're from a big school, and we've had a ton of amazing years at Pettigrew. And then my daughter, who's also at Pettigrew now, but we are lucky enough to start the Challenge Center next year. So we're moving in different directions at the same time. My biggest thing why I'm here is I understand we have serious crowding issues. We're in a huge school now. We love our big school. It can work. We need to just continue to support, I think, the people who are in the, administrators, teachers in these bigger schools, because it really can work. We've had a great experience where we're at now.
Hi, I'm Mark Cotter. I'm also here representing the city of Sioux Falls, and I'm really happy to be a part of this group. I work for the team of Public Works, and our job is to manage the city's public utilities and the transportation system, both of which will be critical to where the schools get sited and or expansions. One of the activities we just completed over the last 2 years was looking forward with our national consultant on a 10, 20, 50, and 100-year growth pattern for the city of Sioux Falls, and have a lot of those documents that, if interested, we can bring to these groups. We also have a number of traffic engineers that we can sort of bring to bear as we start to look and strategize at some of these locations. We want to make sure, whether you're pedestrian or driving a car to these facilities, that we can do it safely and have the capacity to service into the future. So just like Mike, super excited to be a part of this group, and we can bring a number of resources to complement potentially some of the questions that will come up out of these planning studies.
Thank you. My name is Dena Messick, and I was the principal at Whittier Middle School for 17 years until 2010, and I was the first principal at New Tech High. Honored to be the first principal at New Tech High. And now I work for the University of South Dakota. I'm the internship director, so I supervise principals and superintendents across the country. So I've recently, in those years, been in New York, California, Colorado, Las Vegas, and a lot of places in South Dakota. So I've really had the experience of seeing every kind of school and every kind of funding and resources you can imagine that actually I couldn't imagine. Some good, some bad. It always, when I come back to Sioux Falls, I am so proud of the school district and the progress it's made and how it has pushed us forward. And my concern is of course Whittier, because that is a very tight neighborhood and has been a strong neighborhood for decades, probably centuries. And so I really want to see us not like move out of the core. And I really want to focus on us preparing our kids for the future, not the present and not our past, but the future and the kinds of things we need to do to have the space to, architecturally provide the kinds of things that our kids need rather than just a single classroom space. So I'm very happy to be here.
Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Hazing. My husband Pete and I are two of the thousands of people who have moved to Sioux Falls in the past couple of years. We returned here to the Midwest and to our roots after nearly 15 years living in the Southeast, in South Carolina and in Florida before that. It's quality of life and public school education that brought us here to this place, and I'm honored, as I mentioned, to be a part of the group that will be listening and learning and conversing and making recommendations to the school board. In my career in nonprofit management, I've had the opportunity to work with organizations who highlight what's special and unique about communities, and I'm excited to do that here with a nonprofit that highlights agriculture at Falls Park and expanding that project. We have two children, two sons. The oldest is a first grader just across the street at Robert Frost. My younger son will start kindergarten in 2019, and we're delighted to be here in Sioux Falls, and I'm very happy to be a part of this group.
Hi, my name is Brian Riley. Like Thomas, who's absent at the moment, we have 4 boys, ages from 5 to 12, so a little bit younger. But the time that I've spent in Sioux Falls, it's been about 4 years. We moved from Omaha. I grew up in the Twin Cities, went to public school up there. While we were in Omaha, I was a public school teacher and then became a stay-at-home dad, which is what I am still doing. Like these two have said, I think it's really important to build a program and an education system that looks to the future, as well as be stewards of the community's resources as we do that. I think that's something that we are kind of responsible to as we progress and move forward.
I'm Susan Quello, and I have been a school teacher for years. I taught in an impoverished school in Minnesota. That was a wonderful experience for me and gave me a great experience, or a great perspective of having close to 65% of the kids were on free and reduced program, and our academics were excellent. The support from the community made all the difference. And then I moved to Sioux Falls, and the timing was wonderful as I came to Sioux Falls, I was hired over at Eugene Field, and I got to be a part of the process of understanding that the inner city school numbers were starting to go down, and how can we meet this program or meet the needs of the school by drawing in people who would like to attend. And that's kind of why we were looking at specialty programs at that time, and I got to be a part of the adoption of and the research of the A+ school. And I loved that it looked at the problem as an exciting challenge to meet the needs of our students, and to really dream bigger and not being afraid of change. So it was an absolute honor to be a part of the adoption of that, and then to be teaching there for about 5 years. And then from that point, it was the birth of our third child, and then I too stayed home and have been home and supporting my children in their classrooms through the years, and working with the Children's Museum in Brookings as well. Our children are my son is in 3rd grade at Spanish Immersion, and my daughter is at 6th grade over at Patrick Henry, and then my oldest is a sophomore at Lincoln. So I am honored to be a part of this program, because I too feel like, as an educator and as a parent, we're so invested in the future, and I think it's really exciting, and it speaks a lot that the district would pull together all these resources. I think just that alone makes me feel like this is the right place to be, and the conversation will be rich. So.
I'm Mary Shielbicey. I'm a small business owner. I'm a grandmother. I have 2 grandchildren in the Sioux Falls School District. I think that we as a district, we need to be offering the Cadillac of education in South Dakota, and I'm just thrilled to be a part of this committee. Thank you.
I'm Darcy Dunker-Muller. I am a regional account executive for a large card processing company. I have a child who is a 7th grader in Memorial. So we went through Pettigrew, and that was added on too quickly after, and we're at Memorial, and that's at capacity. And we're in the Roosevelt district, but he's got high hopes for New Tech. So we can see it even only a few years into the school that there's a lot of need for expansion and for growth, and for finding those places where there's gaps, and where we can be putting new schools, and finding a way to find a solution so that we can make sure that our students are staying within that appropriate ratio, so they're getting a quality education, and so that the teaching staff isn't overwhelmed with obnoxious numbers of students in their classrooms, because everything kind of depletes at that point when it gets so high that they can't give the kids the individual education that they all deserve. I'm really excited to see some of the numbers and how things lay out. That's how my brain works, is those numbers pieces. So where those gaps are, and where we find places to fill them, and finding all the appropriate means to do that, whether that is expansion or it's new schools or whatever, to make sure that it's spread across appropriately, and the population it makes sense where we're putting them. So I'm excited about the numbers piece of it, to figure out where it's all going to fit.
My name is Angela Lammers. I am a longtime South Dakotan, relatively new here to Sioux Falls. I moved here 5 years ago. We live on the west side. I have 2 stepchildren, although technically they are now step adults. They came out of Roosevelt and New Tech, and Roosevelt is just fine, but we love, love, love New Tech. Huge fans of it in our home. I work professionally. I own a small business here in town where I provide consulting services to professional associations, usually in the area of marketing and communication. So very excited to be here. I love our growing community. I think there's a lot of great things about Sioux Falls, and I think there's a lot of great opportunities with growth, and I look forward to participating with all of you on this program.
My name is Jeff Herbert, and I was born and raised in Sioux Falls, a product of Laura Wilder, Edison, and Washington High downtown. I also taught in Sioux Falls for 30 years. I began my career at Axtell Park. I was at Roosevelt when it opened, and then I spent my last 20 years at Washington High School, my alma mater. I'm very proud to be on this group. Thinking about why I was asked, I asked Deanne, and she said, well, you have a sense of history. And a lot of times she will call me if there's a question, especially about Old Washington High. But I'd like to think of myself also as someone whose own children graduated, grew up and graduated from high school, or all the schools in Sioux Falls. I have 3 children, and they're all out of school now, and I hope someday I have grandchildren who can also hopefully enjoy Sioux Falls. My wife was a longtime teacher in Sioux Falls, and she just retired last spring. She really likes South Dakota retirement, by the way. I see a lot of familiar faces here, classmates from high school, former students are here, parents, and many other people, and I really am honored to be here. In kind of summing my feelings up, I'm kind of the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future, because I do have a sense of history. I was on a lot of committees over the years here, building committees also with Mr. Kreider, I believe, and enjoyed those and learned a lot. This is a great school district. My kids received a wonderful education, and I hope to somehow give back to that in this committee, where we can build a future that our children, our grandchildren, and for many generations have a sense of what we did, and that we did those things that we would consider being right. So thank you very much.
My name is Jack Marsh. I moved here with my family a little over 25 years ago. I was transferred here from New York and New Jersey. Originally when I came here, was the editor of the Argus Leader. I went on to do some other things, but now retired, and am a community volunteer, and that's a wonderful. It's a wonderful status. Cathy, you're going to enjoy it. You're going to enjoy it. I'm chairman of the board of Face It Together, a national organization based here in Sioux Falls. I'm also chairman of Sioux Falls Board of Ethics, and I'm the co-founder and co-chair of a new nonprofit news organization called South Dakota Newswatch. My mother was a teacher. My wife, of the past 48 years, had her career in education and worked for the Sioux Falls School District for about 20 years. I think she worked in 7 or 8 different school buildings here in the district. When she retired from the district, she was the counselor at Lowell Elementary School, where she served for the last 15 years of her career. Our 2 adult daughters, both graduates of Roosevelt High School. Matter of fact, Jeff was, I think, taught both of them at Roosevelt. And we now have 3 granddaughters in the school district. We have a 3rd grader and a 5th grader at Sonia Sotomayor, and we have a 6th grader at Edison. I am not a product of the Sioux Falls schools, but I have worked as a volunteer mentor in 3 separate schools over the last 4 years, and that has been such a fulfilling experience for me, and an opportunity to see firsthand the outstanding work that's being done in this school district. I truly believe that this school district is the most important public asset we have. And as goes the Sioux Falls School District, goes this community as a whole. And it's an honor and a privilege to serve on this committee.
Thank you. My name is Dena Barth, and we have been in Sioux Falls for the last 28 years. I started as a parent volunteer with my children. Was inspired by a teacher who said, you know, you should do this, and did, and taught for this in the Sioux Falls School District for a while, and then decided to leave that career and served on the school board here. And now I have a favorite role as being grandparent. We have 4 children. 2 of them are teachers. 1 of them teaches here at Patrick Henry, and 1 teaches in Connecticut. And we have 3 grandchildren, really 4. Yeah, we do have 4 now, 4 grandchildren, 2 of which attend Sonia Sotomayor. I had the privilege of serving on the last facilities committee as a volunteer, and walked with Jeff Kreider and about 7 other people through every single building, every boiler room, every classroom. And since then, I am so proud of what that committee achieved because it kept us where we are right now. And I look around the room thinking, wow, I have a chance to do it over again, because I hear your passion and I hear your commitment to not only Sioux Falls, but the children and those who serve them. And I am not only in awe, but grateful to be in your presence. So I'm looking forward to what we can accomplish. And hopefully 20 years from now, one of you, not me, will be sitting in this chair saying, I did that before, and I'm proud of what we did.
Hi there, my name is Erin Bosch. I am the director of the MB Women's Leadership Program and also Dress for Success Sioux Falls. I'm here as a parent, but as a community member as well. My daughter Olive is a second grader at Eugene Field. My son Robbie will be busting through the doors as a kindergartner next fall. He's very excited. But I think why I'm really here is we are so fortunate to have the schools that we do in Sioux Falls. I'm a product of 4 elementary schools. I went to Jane Addams, JFK, Harvey Dunn, and Mark Twain, and saw the different schools, got to know the different teachers, had a really intimate close-up relationship with those particular schools, and really saw that the differences and how they're unique, and I really embrace that. And I want my kids to have an opportunity to grow up in the same kind of situation that I did, and getting different experiences. So glad to be here.
Thanks. Rich Aguilar. I bring a kind of a unique experience. I was born and raised in an urban setting. My education was primarily in an urban setting. I married a Sioux Falls girl, and after 10 years, we had a sit-down discussion about what raising kids is all about, and I lost. My experience was quite different than what her experience was, and I thank my lucky stars that I did find a job with Citibank and retired from Citi. A couple years ago. But I think we have 2 adult daughters, both of whom are products of the school system. And we have 3 grandchildren, 2 of which are in Sioux Falls, not yet school age. And one is in Omaha, which we will get to Sioux Falls. And so we want them to have that same experience. It's very unique. Coming out of the financial services field, I just don't know of any other critical financial investment we can make than this. It really is the springboard to just about everything. And so our focus should be there, and I'm just excited to be here.
Marty DeLores, I'm a financial advisor here in town. My wife and I, Amy, live on the far west side of town. And we have a 2-year-old and a 3-month-old. And in fact, today is my wife's first day back at work, so tonight's meeting has me 1 foot in the doghouse that I'm missing dinner time. I was asked to be on this committee, and I saw it as an opportunity to try and give back to Sioux Falls because we just love this town, and hopefully offer a little bit of a unique perspective, knowing that we've got future kids going into the school system. So happy to be here, and thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Marcus Malin. I'm a commercial real estate broker here in town at NAI Sioux Falls Commercial. I'm part of this task force and this committee, I believe, mostly through my involvement through the Sioux Falls Area Chamber of Commerce, specifically with the Young Professionals Network, where I'm the chair of the civic engagement team, where we are active in events just like this, getting involved in the local school board, local elections, the mayoral election, city council, and everything along those lines. I'm not from Sioux Falls. I grew up in a small town of Webster, South Dakota, if anyone is familiar. So I've lived in town here for about 4 years now, and I'm just happy to be a part of the team and I'm part of the task force to be able to give back to the committee and give back to the future of the city. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Dena Berg, and I'm here because I am a parent. I have 3 children in the Sioux Falls School District, ages 7, 3, and 1. Ainsley is at Rosa Parks Elementary, and we're very lucky to be there. Prior to being Chief Executive Officer of our household, I was in education. I served as a Principal and Curriculum Director for the T Area School District, and prior to that, I worked for the ESA, which is an educational service agency, and I did consulting for school districts within the region and around the state. My early career was in Harrisburg, and then I also worked at the private sector in the Catholic schools. So I bring a couple different perspectives with me. I've been in a couple districts that have experienced a lot of growth and some of those growing pains that go along with it. But again, it's a good problem to have, and I'm excited for what the upcoming years hold for my children in the Sioux Falls School District, as well as all of the children in our school district. So thanks for having me.
My name is Brian Grady, and I'm the Vice President of Finance with Lloyd Companies. I'm here primarily on behalf of the Chamber. I'm Vice Chair of the Issues Management Committee for the Chamber. Personally, I have 3 boys, 2 which are in college now, one at the University Center, one down at University of South Dakota, and the other one is a sophomore down in Harrisburg. All 3 of my boys started out in the Sioux Falls School District, went to John Harris Elementary. We had an opportunity to move to Omaha for a couple of years, and so they actually spent some time in the Millard School District down in Omaha, which I think is a pretty highly regarded school district. Then when we moved back, we chose Southern Sioux Falls in the Harrisburg School District, so we witnessed some of the growth down there. So excited to be a part of this, and hopefully I can be of help.
That was an important part of this meeting. We are already over schedule, but that's okay because we're going to take time from Dr. Maher, I think. So Nan has a couple things first.
Home, Success, Education for All, Nonprofit Partnership, Education Foundation, Pride, Growth, City of Sioux Falls, Parent History, Supportive, Teacher Administrators, Utility, Transportation, Core Neighborhood, Future Preparation, Quality of Life, Specialty Schools, South Dakota Leaders in Education, Alma Mater, Give Back, Business Community, the Chamber of Commerce, School Consultant, Urban Education. Talent, experience, passion, curiosity is what we have found in this task force. And I forgot to mention why I'm here. Vernon and I are here largely to serve all of you. So we're happy to be here. With that, Dr. Maher. Dr. Maher has been with our school district for a little over 3 years. He has created a process that has been transparent, participatory, engaging, and with that, he's here to tell us a little more.
Thank you, Nan. You know, you all looked really good on paper, but in person and listening to your stories, went, wow, I think we got this right. This looks good. I want to give one person a real shout out. First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody, but I want to give one real shout out. Ann Madsen. Ann's a senior, if you remember, she's a senior. I think it was so critical for us to have a student voice. Ann is part of a student advisory group that I have the honor of meeting with quarterly. I've had the opportunity, number one, to see her transcripts. They didn't look anything like mine. But number two, I've also had an opportunity to see how busy she is. And I think as adults, we know how busy we are. Our students are incredibly busy, particularly our students who are of the caliber of Ann. So thank you to all of you, and Ann, a special thank you to you for bringing the student voice to this group. I want to start with two quick stories. One of them was about 3 years ago when I interviewed for this job. And it's a story of when I got my first superintendency, and I had a veteran superintendent call me. And he said, Brian, this superintendent gig is really easy if you will remember these two things. Number one is there are times as a superintendent where you've got to get out and you've got to lead. You've got to be in front of the Board of Education, and you've got to grab them and say, let's go. Come on, we've got to lead. He said, that's number one. The second thing to remember is there are times when you've got to remember you're the hired help. And I think for all of us sitting over there, we've got to remember at this point, we're the hired help, and we need to get out of the way. And it's time for you to give us our marching orders. So that's, I think, really, really critical for us to remember. The second story I want to give is this, and that is I've been through a few bond issues, 3, as a matter of fact, as a superintendent, and they all follow a similar process to this. But I think there is a critical component
in the process, and you're a part of it right now. I get asked from time to time, do you have an idea on where this should be? Well, of course I do, and all of you do as well, I suspect. But through my previous experiences, one thing that has become really clear, if I'll stay out of the way and let you do the work, the end result that you come up with will be far greater than the individual result that I have in mind. So those are the two stories for tonight. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the process that we're following. You see this, you see it up here, 5 steps to this process. One is to learn, and that's just to really get all of our data and get the information that we have as a school district. And maybe this was our part when I talked about leading and then getting out of the way. I think that was part of the leading, was getting all of our information and talking and really defining the problem. And we'll do that for you here tonight, as we've done in our community engagement meetings. The second thing is really to get the community engaged. I know many of you, maybe all of you, but many of you have been to a community engagement meeting where you've seen the information already. I think our community's had that opportunity, and through you, we'll have a greater opportunity to continue to really engage the community in this process. And then on May 1st or thereabouts, we'll have a survey that goes out to our community again to gather more information. So ultimately, you'll have a lot of information to really get us into this third step, which is to develop the options. And that's where you come in. That's the critical piece, I think, in this, is that developing of options. And I think as you go through your 4 meetings, my previous experience has shown me you're going to get a lot of information. You're going to have a lot of people with a lot of ideas, both part of this group and part of the community who pays attention to what you're doing. And after about meeting 2 or meeting 3, you'll be wondering, will we ever get to a solution? And my experience is you will. So no matter how frustrating this gets after meeting 2 or meeting 3, just know that you'll get to where you need to be. And that's to develop those options, prioritize those options, and ultimately hand those off to the Board of Education. This piece right here, next to the vote that ultimately will have to happen, I think this piece right here that will happen in April and May with you 30 people is really the critical piece in this whole process. So I wish you well. Number 4 then is the Board of Education. They'll get the information from you after May 30th, your last meeting, and they'll have June and a brief period of July to really put the scope of that project together, whatever that is, however many buildings that touches, whatever new projects or whatever reinvented buildings comes through your work, that'll be handed off to the Board of Education for them to ultimately say, of this list of 73 things that the task force gave us, we're going to do 20 of them in the bond issue, and here's the amount. So that's ultimately how that'll happen. And then hopefully in September, if things keep on the track that they're on right now, hopefully in September, our community will ultimately say yes or no. And one of the things that I've said in our other community engagement meetings is this. This isn't a superintendent issue, and I contend this isn't even a Board of Education issue, even though they're elected to represent you and represent your neighbors. Rather, this is a community issue, and it goes beyond my office and goes beyond the Board of Education. It's truly a community issue. So I want to thank you for really being the group that represents that community, that gives of your time, and really comes and does the heavy lifting as we get prepared for that election in September. So I think next I turn it over to Joe Donovan. Scrambling about 30 minutes ago, we were wondering, what do we do if Joe Donovan doesn't get here? Joe Donovan is the CEO of the Donovan Group that we've hired to bring us in and really work us through the community engagement process and this task force process. He's been absolutely wonderful to work with because number 1, he knows how these group processes should go, but number 2, he doesn't have a dog in the fight. He just cares about serving this community. So we really appreciate his work. But the snowstorm, he's coming from Milwaukee, put him in a precarious position, but he did get here. He landed 7 minutes ago, I think.
Just about that.
And got here in time. So it's truly my pleasure to thank you one more time and to turn it over to Joe Donovan.
Well, hi, everyone. And I am very grateful to be with you today, not only because I was in airports all day, but I get to go all over the country increasingly. I work out of Milwaukee and worked for many years with Wisconsin school districts, and increasingly I do the kind of work that you're doing today in districts around the country. And I love it. I love bringing people together so that they can discuss their shared values for their schools. So that's the script. I do have to add one other thing. I have spent a lot of time in Sioux Falls with the engagement sessions. There were a couple of snow days. I got snowed in here a couple of days. And so I feel like I've gotten to know Sioux Falls a little bit. And I will tell you this, and you know this, there's something very special here. And I went back to Milwaukee and I talked to my colleagues after the engagement sessions, and I said, I saw something I've never seen before. After our engagement sessions, and many of you were in the room, after the engagement sessions, people got up and they continued the conversation. Most of the time, after you go through a couple of hours of discussing things, people just kind of want to get up and get out of there, and that didn't happen here. And so again and again, I see great things that are happening here. And so I'm just so very grateful to be a part of it. And I'm so very grateful not to be on an airplane and an airport as well. I'd like to talk with you a little bit about roles. And I'd like to start with your roles as task force members. As Dr. Maher mentioned, your role is really to dig in, to ask questions. A lot of information is going to be presented to you. And I will say, and Dr. Maher mentioned this, it may get a little frustrating, especially once we get to that second and third meeting. This will work out, I promise. But please, ask a lot of questions, engage. That's what this is about. You know, this is a transparent process. You're going to be talking with other people in the community. Listen and bring those concerns to the meeting. That's number one. As it relates to my role, I'm a neutral third party. I really like coming to your city, but I don't live here. I don't have children in the district. I don't pay taxes here. I also don't have any connection at all, financially or otherwise, with anything that you may or may not decide. Okay? So again, I'm a neutral third party. My job is largely to be behind the scenes. I'll be working with the co-chairs. I'll work with others as needed. I'll assist with the creation of the report, but my job is really just to help ensure that the process, you know, follows through. And again, I'll be, again, very much behind the scenes. As it relates to school board members, we're grateful that school board members may be in attendance with us tonight. They won't actively participate, though. This is about you. And so school board members, as Dr. Maher mentioned, will certainly have a say, a big say in all of this. But for now, they're going to be taking a step back. And finally, members of district staff will be here. There'll be resources to you in the same way that I will be. Okay, we're going to see some presentations in a little bit. We'll see more in the next couple of weeks. But again, they're going to be providing information. We all work for you, and that's important for you to know. I work for you, and I'm here as a resource. So with that, I'll finish as I started just by thanking you for the opportunity to be here today. I'm really excited about this. And again, I came in as you were doing introductions, but again, just so, what a great group. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. We're going to go into the charge of what we need to accomplish here. And I want to just give you a lay of the land a little bit that Joe has helped us lay out. This first meeting is really about the need, what need we have in the district. The second will be largely about the resources. What resources are available? What do we have to do to get this done? The third meeting we'll work on the initial solution. So this happens quickly. We'll start to draft the solution. And then in the fourth meeting, we'll have the fine tuning of the final recommendations. So we have a big job in front of us, and we're going to have to run tight meetings. So my ask is that we're respectful of time. Nan and I will have to cut you off at times. Please don't take offense, but it's to keep us all on task and on time. Keep the conversations relevant to facilities. And our time will be filled with presentations, but we do want you to ask questions during that. We may cut off the questions at times and save, because we do have time reserved at the end for those. But also don't forget, Nan told you about the sheet right there, the parking lot. So if you want to write them on there, so we're sure to capture those, that would be great. Nan is going to walk us through our charge.
You will not get honked at if you go back to the parking lot. It's encouraged. Okay, so our current facility topics for the task force to address. We will look at the impact of growing enrollment, capacity, aging facilities, equity across the district, establishment of new standards, security or ADA. Our charge of the task force are the general guidelines of solutions are aligned to the district's mission, vision, strategic priorities. We are fiscally responsible, adhere to the district facility standards, are prioritized. Our solutions allow the district to expand or contract with enrollment shifts. Solutions ensure all buildings are safe, secure, welcoming environments. Solutions will be considered only after all community input from engagement sessions and the website have been reviewed. The desired results of the final solution. Equitable opportunities across the district. District capacity is flexible, so it can expand and contract with enrollment shifts. Schools have enough properly sized learning spaces to accommodate all enrolled students. A building's character is warm and welcoming, creating a place that students, staff, and community want to be. History shall be honored in these spaces. Buildings will be flexible enough to change with evolving curriculum and enrollment numbers. Indoor environments will be supportive of teaching and learning. This includes temperature, humidity, air quality, lighting, etc. Properly sized and outfitted spaces will be provided for specialized program offerings. Staff will have appropriate meeting and collaboration spaces. And at this point, we will turn it over to Mike Cooper. And Mike is here to talk about this interesting relationship that we as a public school district have with the growing city of Sioux Falls. He has some visuals, some maps that we can look at, and other various diagrams. If any of you need to shift or move to align yourself with Mike, please do so.
Thank you. This is the low technology version of the presentation tonight. And I just want to make sure that you know, because it's going to be hard for all of you to see what I'm pointing to tonight, but we'll make sure that we have copies of this that you can put into your notebook for future reference. So kind of bear with me tonight as we go through this initial review. So my task was to kind of give you the broad picture, and Mark, my teammate, maybe can chime in as well as we talk about some of the growth impacts that may affect the school district. So I have to use my maps. And again, don't get too concerned if you can't see all the details on this. There's no doubt that Sioux Falls has been growing, and that growth has been impacting the Sioux Falls School District in many ways. And one of the ways that we can track that is by where people are building residences, whether they're single-family, townhomes, or apartments. And so we're able to provide you with some historical data. What I have up here today is just from last year, 2017, showing you each dot on the map represents a single-family housing building permit. The yellow dots represent those that have a value of up to $250,000, and then the red dots are over $250,000. That's the building permit valuation. So it doesn't necessarily represent the full market value of a finished home on a lot, but it does give us some indication as far as a little bit of a breakdown in terms of single family. The other thing, if you get up a little closer, you can see that the area that's in the middle that does not have a color on it, the white area, represents the boundaries of the Sioux Falls District. And then around us are our friends and neighbors, the other school districts. So on the northwest side, we have Tri-Valley, West Central, Lenox, the T Area School District, and then across the bottom is Harrisburg. There's a little corner actually of Canton School District within our city limits. And then on the east side is primarily Brand Valley. And I think most of you know that the Sioux Falls District goes all the way up north to Renner as well. So the school boundaries do not change as the city boundaries do. And as we continue to annex development land in all directions, that is not always going to impact the Sioux Falls District. But there is going to be a significant number of years where the district will continue to be impacted by residential construction. And if you look at this up close, if you have a chance to later on, you can see that up in the northeast area, it's pretty limited as far as residential growth. There's a number of factors. It's primarily more of an industrial business park development area. And then on the north side, we have the Big Sioux River, the airport, which limits, for the most part, residential development. There's a small area up on North Cliff, but that's also part of the Brandon Valley School District. This southeast area still has quite a bit of growth area potential that will continue to impact the Sioux Falls District. And it basically goes down to 57th Street and then just east of what we're calling Veterans Parkway. So these red and yellow dots in the southeast part of this map, we'll continue to see more of those as that area fills in. On the south and south central, we're getting pretty well maxed out as far as the Sioux Falls District. There are some small pockets of residential development along Western Avenue, but most of this growth area is impacting the Harrisburg District versus Sioux Falls. And then the very southwestern area is, again, primarily the T Area School District. On the west side, which would be roughly 26th Street, is where you see another cluster of housing construction activity. Between 12th and 26th Street has been the most active residential growth area the last couple of years that's still within the Sioux Falls District boundaries. But we're gradually getting closer and closer to that edge, and we'll be bumping up against Lenox and even West Central boundaries. Up on the northwest area, this little box, if you can see it from where you're sitting, is McGovern Middle School. The gray line, I should have said earlier, represents the Sioux Falls city limits, as opposed to the school district boundaries, which is in the white area. A small number of residential homes have been added this last year or so in terms of single family, but that's an area that has a lot more potential as well. It's quite a ways away from being totally built out yet. So we expect that the northwest up to Benson Road and all the way west of La Mesa, which is a mile west of Marion Road, that will be a long-term growth area around McGovern Middle School, which, if you don't know, there's also land available next to McGovern for a future elementary school. So as we've heard, the northwest area is probably the location that we're going to be looking at for some future needs, as well as how we're going to be impacted by the southeast area. And you'll hear a little bit later on about the various schools, the school buildings, where they're at in terms of a capacity and enrollment projections. The core area, we're always looking for more of these dots because we want to continue to have a strong central area of the city of Sioux Falls. But there's no doubt that in terms of new construction, it's going to be more limited than it would be on the very edges. Another version of this that we can provide you would show you where the townhome and multifamily building permits have also been approved. And we can go back 5 years if you want to. The maps would look very similar to the one that you see in front of you tonight. And again, I apologize because this is too far away for you to see. But in terms of townhomes, what's interesting is that we're starting to see a lot more interest in townhome development in that southeast area as well. So we can provide you a couple of these exhibits that not only summarize single family, but also the townhome multifamily housing market. Another thing that we can do, if this will stay up, is we can track or estimate or project for you what has been approved in terms of future development potential. So we have another inventory that we do each year of approved residential development areas or subdivisions. And we have those mapped out by various school district boundaries. So all of these yellow boxes or yellow areas represent a residential development that's been approved and is in different stages of implementation. And we have an inventory by name of each subdivision, as well as the number of future single-family twin home lots, and also the number of potential multifamily units within each one of those. So we can give you an indication at least of what's already been approved, of what the additional construction activity could be over the next 5 to 7 years. For those of you that were not Good Morning Sioux Falls, we talked about this a little bit at that meeting. Our residential absorption, which means how many acres of residential land do we absorb each year, is somewhere in that 400 acres. That's what it has been averaging. And the last couple of years, the total number of units has ranged from 2,400 to 2,700. So we can map out in terms of single family what's already been approved, that maybe is another 5 years of capacity. And for multifamily, because that market fluctuates so much from year to year, we've gone through 2 or 3 really high years of multifamily, and we think that that might start to slow down a little bit this year. That's probably more of a 7 to 8 year inventory or availability of approved development land. But again, if you can kind of pinpoint the boundaries of the Sioux Falls District and where some of these approved development areas are located, you can continue to see that that southeast area is going to have more activity. And as I mentioned earlier, as we're getting closer to building out that west side, and up in the northwest area, although we do have some existing approved subdivisions, there's still going to be quite a bit of additional land area that we can expand west of Marion Road another mile past McGovern Middle School. So that's one that I think, and Mark will agree with us, that that's one that we need to continue to look at long term. And so we can provide the group with maybe some more short-term, long-term projections if that would be of benefit to our decision-making process. And then one more. You want to hold this? No, you don't have to hold this. Just one more type of visual aid. This particular area of the map that's showing the yellow areas, as opposed to the one that I just had up here, show undeveloped land within the overall city of Sioux Falls. And again, we put the school district boundaries on here, so it kind of helps us map out what's available not only for residential land, but also commercial land area, industrial land area, all the different types of development activity that we are anticipating over the next few years. And the reason that I wanted to bring this tonight is, again, to reinforce that as we look at these patterns of development, primarily residential, that's going to impact the district down the road, you can kind of see again what has been approved, what's been built, I should say, what's been approved for future construction, and then what's still vacant to go even beyond that in terms of development potential. Now, it's kind of hard to distinguish some of this, that which school district it's in, but a lot of the eastern growth of the city of Sioux Falls, as I mentioned, east of Veterans Parkway, is going to impact primarily the Brandon Valley School District. The southern edge, we're getting close to the edge of our city growth area because we're running out of sanitary sewer capacity. And there's another longer-term solution to that that Mark kind of alluded to as part of his introduction, that as we are projecting out the overall development of the city and the services that we need to provide to accommodate that growth, we're mapping out 10, 20 plus years for sanitary sewer, for water, for parks, for fire stations, all those different city facilities and infrastructure needs. And then on the west side, again, we're getting close to maxing out pretty much what's going to be available for not only sewer capacity, but also for the Sioux Falls district. This is getting closer to the future growth area of the city of T, and then down off the map would be the future growth area of Harrisburg, the city of Brandon, and then up here north of Foundation Park is the city of Crooks. So just keep in mind as we're going through our projections, Northwest is probably going to have more of the long-term development, and more of the short-term would be probably the southeast area, and then on the west side. Not so much on the northeast. There will be some, but not as much in terms of percentage of development. So we can map a lot of this out and provide you a lot more detail as we go on. And I'm getting close to my time. I'm sorry, but okay. Thank you. I just had a couple of projects that I mentioned at the Good Morning Sioux Falls presentation. And let me bring back this other one. Let's just keep this one up here because this probably works the best. And again, I apologize, you can't see what I'm pointing at. In terms of residential development that we're expecting this year, up in the Northeast, as I said, it's a little bit more limited. An interesting little infill project is called the Cleveland Center Apartments, which will be 39 affordable housing apartments over on Cleveland Avenue and 8th Street. And that's a Lloyd Companies project. Can I say that? Okay, I just did. All right. So, as I said earlier, we're always looking for ways that we can maximize the housing construction within some of our existing mature core areas of the city. Over on the northeast corner, at the intersection of 6th and Cleveland, the northeast corner of that area is going to be another affordable housing project called Sherwood Apartments. It's only 12 units, but again, it's just another little step of how we're maximizing or trying to maximize some of this infill development. And then there's a number of other single-family residential projects, again, that we could talk about up here on the northeast side. But I just wanted to kind of go through what we have on the horizon for this year. In the southeast area, over by Dolly Farm, just north of Rosa Parks, is a development called Dublin Square Townhomes, which has really taken off a lot and is providing a lot more residential development. We never really thought that when Dolly Farm first went through approval that it was going to be such a magnet for residential development. We thought it was going to be primarily a shopping center concept. But what we're seeing in Sioux Falls as well as around the country is that shopping and residential can coexist, and in many cases they want to coexist. So Dolly Farm is starting to see a little bit more residential development, and this is just north of Rosa Parks Elementary School. And then there's some more elderly apartments that are also being constructed, but that's not going to impact our school district enrollment too much, I don't think. So that's supposed to be humorous. Okay, sorry, yes. Also on the southeast area is a site that we call the Kappeman property, and it's just south of 26th Street, just across from Rosa Parks on the west side of Veterans Parkway. That was recently annexed, and we've gone through the zoning approval. That's going to be a major residential development. And for the historian in the room, back when we were trying to find a site for Rosa Parks, although we didn't know the name of it back then, that was the location that we were trying to work on. But at that time, the property owners had no interest in working with us for a future elementary school. So we went across the street on the north side of 26th Street. So that's going to be another major, as I said, residential development area to watch for in the future. Moving to the southwest area, as I said, we're getting close to maximizing that in terms of development activity for residential, at least the part that's going to be within the Sioux Falls district boundaries. We have a small development called Spring Avenue Townhomes, which is actually more in the core area along 23rd Street and Minnesota Avenue, right north of Slim Chickens. So who would have thought that you want to live next to a chicken retail store? But that's another little infill project that is just kind of fun to watch.
Did you say they're houses or?
They're condominiums, so they're owner occupied, yep. And then the northwest area, again, just to kind of reinforce, we have a development called the Grasslands Addition, which is on Marion Road and 34th Street North. There's some of the single-family permits that we've added in the last few years. Aspen Heights Addition, which is a residential development on Madsen and Marion Road. There's still quite a bit of capacity for that to expand. And then the Thielen Center Townhomes over on Kerr Avenue, south of Benson Road, is another more multifamily development that's seeing a lot of activity, a lot of interest in that area of the Northwest for more, say, multifamily residential growth. So the bottom line is that we're seeing some impacts around the district boundaries, some areas more than others. And another key part of this that I want to go back to Mark Cotter's introduction, that we can provide you some information as we look further along at specific sites or specific facility recommendations, is let's keep in mind our infrastructure. We have a 5-year capital program through the city of Sioux Falls, and that capital program focuses primarily on roads and utilities for the most part. The majority of our capital program is for infrastructure. And so as we're mapping out some future location needs for new construction, we need to keep in mind what the impacts are going to be on some of that infrastructure. And I think at some future point, Mark will be able to talk about that in a little bit more detail. But keep in mind as we, I've been involved in when we located Washington High and Roosevelt and Memorial and McGovern and a number of elementary schools over the years. And there's a number of impacts that we look at for those locations in terms of traffic and infrastructure and other development that's going to happen around it. So that's kind of why we are excited to also be participants in this process. So I probably went way too long, but it's fun to talk about this information.
We are a little bit behind, so
okay.
Jot your questions down and hold them for a minute. We do need to talk about this. So we've got time reserved at the end for questions.
Good, that's great.
So Jeff Kreider. Thank you, Mike.
Are you using easels?
Okay, I'm here to talk about facility capacities. This is a summary of elementaries. Now, every year we kind of look at every room by building. If you look at, I've got spreadsheets. This is a summary portion. What's that? Oh, I'm Jeff Kreider, Director of Operational Services for the district. So for those who don't know me, Jeff Herbert was sat on that first committee too. He didn't say that. So I've been with the district for 28 years, 25 or about 23 in this capacity that I am
currently. Started as a construction supervisor, so that's kind of my background. I'm an architect and have a civil engineering degree as well. So for Iowa State, for those people who looking for where that was. So go Cyclones. Well, anyway, yearly we go through what our building capacities are, look at the room utilization. Elementaries, they do not vary a lot, but this spreadsheet shows the summary of all the elementaries. We look at total classrooms available. We look at art rooms, vocal music, band orchestra, OTPT, RISE is a special ed program, and we pull those out of the capacity for K-12 elementary, what's available for K-12. And we look at where we have class size reduction, and then we look at the overall capacity. Under this one, if you look at when we did those community engagement, we used a 90%, and it virtually showed every elementary at or over capacity. So we tried to take a little more conservative under this approach and just say, let's live by what our standards are with one multi-purpose classroom and see where that hit, and that's what this is. And I think the next one will show what those are by elementary schools. Can't see them very well, but there's 22 buildings, 22 elementaries. They range in age from 1934 of Lowell Elementary to 2016 Sotomayor. It tells you what year they were built on this sheet. You all have that, don't you? Okay, so you can see what each one of them are built, what's their specialized area. Just wanted to make one change in the sections. If you look at Discovery and Pettigrew, those are 5+ section schools. We added on several years ago and made those quite significantly large. And then we have pre-K, who has pre-K in them. And RISE is a special ed program, and where the Immersion Center is. As you can see with this, and this is that one with the one multi-purpose room, you look at 14 are at or over capacity, and the remaining are really close to capacity currently. So that's a very, very conservative look at. If you look nationally, they're probably saying calculated at about 0.9 utilization for elementaries, and that would put us pretty much all of them at overcapacity, at or over capacity. Hawthorne is probably one that shows the most, that shows 60 down. That's in a center portion of the community, that more downtown. So it looks like overall, based on that scenario, we're at about 158, have 158 student capacity remaining in all elementaries across. That might sound like a lot, but it's about 0.28 kids per classroom. So it doesn't give you a lot of flexibility in there. The capacity is based on what our staffing ratio is of 24.3, and then in class size reduction 18.9. So that's what those calculate out to be on elementary. Okay. If you go to the middle school, we kind of follow the same procedure. We calculate more rooms that are available. All this, we don't calculate out those specials and those sort of things. We use 24.42 for class size. This is a little harder one to calculate during when I meet with, we go through with the principals and such, because they're all over capacity, so they're using unique ways to use classrooms. So when you start talking about classrooms, they put in classrooms in staff workroom and other things. They virtually eliminated all the resource rooms, and they have standard classrooms in there. So you got to tip off the hats to them, because they're scheduling that building as tight as possible. They're probably in the 90, 95, 99% utilization. But nationally, you look at 80 to 85% utilization. That's how you schedule, because they're moving around. You can't be in one space at one time, and then you got to try to fit in all your home ec, your tech ed, those kind of things, gym, and that to move them around. So when you calculate this, they like to see you at 85%, and that's, or 80 to 85%. We use a higher number here because we think we can do it. We've been doing it for years over that, but 85 is a pretty good number to be utilizing for capacity. And based on that, you're looking at 333 already over capacity in a middle school. And if you look at the ages of those buildings, Whittier is the oldest at 1923. It was the original building. Actually, the original building was constructed as an elementary school and modified to a middle school later on. And then 2014 was McGovern. Now, these numbers here are adjusted per standard, so we pull out, when we calculate that, I pull out the resource rooms per our district standards and every other room, so that's how you're seeing those numbers that exist. So we adjusted these to standards so you have a good feeling of what actually is happening. We're utilizing the rooms, but we are over capacity if you look at what's out there right now.
Did you say class size for middle school is 24, or is that just in general? Is that all?
That's it's 24.42. Yeah. Yep. Then if you go to the high schools, we've got Lincoln, New Tech, Roosevelt, Washington. Lincoln's at 1965. Washington's our newest at 1992. New Tech is the project-based learning that's housed out of Southeast Tech in the joint technical use facility. This is 25.15. They follow the same utilization as the middle school of 80 to 85. We use 85, and that's showing us currently at about 473 over capacity right now as far as having more students. So once again, they're doing a phenomenal job of how to schedule. Roosevelt is really working hard to try to find every nook and cranny they can put kids into. Okay, and then other schools, you have Horseman, and that's a behavior center on 26th Street. CTE, that's a career technical academy. They have health, auto, engineering, quite a few other things. Those, Horseman is, you don't use those same class size ratios. That's a behavior program. Their sizes range from 6 to, in some rooms, to 8, depending on what's happening in there. So that's why you see those numbers down. CTE, 8 of their classrooms are associated with labs. So there's some capacity there that you can fill up. And Axtell Park is another behavior alternative school. And if you look at their capacities at about 12 kids per room, depending on what the program is and what those kids are in. So there is some capacity in a few of those, but they're somewhat specialized, so you just can't plug kids in there. So that's capacities, and that, we look at that every year. Special ed, as that enrollment increases, you might have to take another classroom out of capacity to fill those in. So we work with Deb and try to look at that every year. So we're looking at that all the time, depending on, this is a snapshot in time. So.
We have a few minutes for questions. So let's start with Jeff, and we'll go back to Mike, and then I think we'll take a quick break.
Are any of the facilities running up against any capacity issues in terms of air code or
No.
physical issues like that?
No. No.
Quick question.
How long can we run at this rate?
What's that?
How long can we run at this rate you've just described? I mean, 6 months ago, we should have done something. 2 years from now, we'll be dead in the water.
Well, I think Todd's going to give us some projections on where our enrollments are going. So I tell you what, they're at a critical mass at certain.
From your perspective, based on what you see,
we're getting real close to we need to be doing something very soon, especially at the middle and high school level. You might you can get by at the elementary for a few years as you move forward, but then you're taking out art rooms, making music on the cart, those classrooms. You're impacting the education. So they do things creatively to help get some capacity. If there's a bump in a class, that we might have a few more fourth graders, come in. So there's a bump for a kindergarten class is big, and that's unique. So they do some unique things to help ease that. But I think if you look at the projections, you're going to see an elementary need, needs at probably all levels. But high school is probably the most critical in middle school at the current time. So you'll see that probably more so when Todd gives you some of the projections. The more kids you get, the more issues become when they're in a kind of a can and sardined in there. So.
What research has been used to help establish the appropriate size for the school buildings that have recently been built? So you had mentioned in here basically like a 4-section elementary school. Is there research that was used to have the current size of like a Susan B or what we're looking for future high school or something?
I think it's efficiency of the operation. A 4-section is a really good number for an elementary school. For the efficiency of teachers and admin, you don't have to have traveling teachers. They can all be housed in one spot. It can be too small, so the teachers have to move. So efficiency of scheduling, that 4 section is really a good number to be at.
You said which one was 4 section?
It just had put on here the capacity factors page, and after I taught at Eugene Field and it was a small school, and then grew to the larger school, and had a child go through Mark Twain, and then went to Susan B. Anthony. I was always curious what rooted the decision from being the smaller school, which was lovely, and the bigger schools are lovely too, but I was curious if there was a research or resources that maybe from other communities or from just a building perspective as to how we landed.
I think it's to keep everybody housed there so they're not moving around. Then you got the core group of teachers in your building all the time.
And that would be something you would aspire if we were to be building other buildings.
Yeah. Yep. Hey, Jeff.
I don't mean to come from the historical perspective, but here I go. You might want to remind people or just bring them up to where we were years ago, what Roosevelt and Washington were originally.
They were originally built for about 1,800 students. We've added some classrooms on each one of them, and that kind of accommodates some of the special ed growths and changes in education since we moved into those schools.
And how many times have we added on to Roosevelt and Washington? 3 times?
Yeah, 3 times, but some of those weren't always classrooms. It was storage for the arts, the music, and as the population grows, those needs become. So we look at the standards and always are looking at, there's a facility standard modification process that we look at, and we look, and goes through the board, and then we, there's a way to change those standards that we just don't, it's not stagnant once we did that. Because the standards were established in the last CIP the big CIP that you sat on. That's when we toured all the buildings and determined what those standards are. And then we had CIP 2, we actually had a group like this review all the standards again and make changes. And that's when we added some science rooms and some extra rooms to the high schools as the science curriculum expanded. And that's when we did that. And so since that time we said, let's not convene a committee like this, let's have an ongoing process to change the standards so we don't have to wait for every 5 years that, if there's a need out there, that there's a way for a staff member, or administration to turn in their request that gets reviewed, looks at is it building specific or is it district-wide semantic, and so there's a way to get that in place, so we see it and we know it's happening and coming quicker than just waiting every 5 years to review that, because education's changing every year.
Jeff, just another, maybe you can comment about another task that the district has done over the years to accommodate enrollment has been amending the attendance boundaries.
Yep.
Which is a very painful process too. It's just another way that we try to address some of that versus the actual buildings.
Yeah, you try to balance that. That was a big part of, we had a group several years ago, and that's how Discovery and Pettigrew had those big additions. The community asked for bigger schools, so that, bigger schools so they wouldn't have to bus out of the neighborhoods. That's why the board elected not to build the Northwest Elementary at that time and put those additions on. So,
Mike, a question came up for me on many yellow dots or construction in the core area, because there probably isn't a lot of space there, but asking about and looking at the schools in the core, are you seeing turnover of areas in the core area that some of the other older people are moving out to other areas and that new families are coming in that we need to be mindful? Are there census numbers or something? And then also from the Lloyd guy, who's kind of handy, of what you're seeing coming in from that core area or downtown area. Is it single people, retired people? What are those makeups that we don't really see by dots? Because those are the ones that are alarming. But I also am interested in what that turnover might provide and enhance.
You want to go first? Yeah, well, for downtown projects, we see more, probably at the edges of both extremes, more younger and more retired. Probably not so much on the family. Yeah. For obvious reasons, as far as it's just not a music for family.
So one of the things that we have been able to track is in the core areas, there's a lot more affordable housing, and so that's an attraction to families. But people need to move out of their house for a family to move in. We're starting to see a little bit more of a trend in rental units in some of the core neighborhoods, but they're still, in many cases, occupied by families. And I think we're seeing more of a diversity of the population in the core areas as well. So that's probably being reflected in some of the numbers that Todd will go through with you tonight. So we can put together some of the census tract data. It's a little bit dated, but I think it would still maybe help provide some of that big picture look at what the core area really means. So the central area is still pretty, there's not much vacancy. And so the units that are there are occupied. A lot of them are families. A lot of them are rental units. And a lot of them are more the diversity population part of our community. So those are some of the factors that we see and that we can maybe provide some more information to the group on.
Is there a plan that the city has so that there's affordable housing in all areas?
Yeah, the question was, does the city...
Where is affordable housing?
So let's spend a whole evening talking about what is affordable housing, because it's a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So the projects that the city has provided some support for in the last few years have been scattered around different areas of the city. They're not all in the central area. They're not all in the southeast area. They're not all in the northwest. So we've tried to move those around. And part of the debate is, do you put affordable housing out in an area where there's no public transportation? Well, the debate kind of goes back to a lot of people want to own a car. And there's just an article that came out nationwide. There's a trend that more low-income people are now buying cars versus using transit because they want to own a car. That's part of being an American citizen, is to have a car. And there's a lot of used car lots in Sioux Falls, so there's a lot of inventory out there. And I'm I'm kind of going on and on, but the city of Sioux Falls has made a concerted effort to scatter the affordable housing around and not just concentrate in one area. And I think we'll continue to try to do that going forward.
We are seeing more young families buying houses from people that have, gotten too old to live in the home, 50-story or whatever. There is lots of revitalization. There are lots of people, and of course I don't have like the numbers I noticed anecdotally, but people are seeking, a lifestyle with more and more people are seeking that lifestyle of living in the core and being closer to downtown.
And closer to neighborhood schools, right? That's a key part of that too, is neighborhood schools.
So I just have a question as far as, so you're working on the census numbers, so it's naturally going to be dated at this point. What about the wheel tours? Do they have a better handle on who's moving in where? And I'm just, throwing that out there. Is that like, I don't know if realtors have a group, as a group have that sort of information happening.
Can I just jump in, Todd? Because if I'm wrong, you'll tell me. But I think the district tracks pretty well where the attendance or the residents are of the kids, right? So we can tell you where those kids are living that are currently enrolled in the district. So that's probably about as up to date as you can get. So I think in terms of elementary schools, when people are looking for a location to live, and if they have kids that are elementary school age or they're going to be, I think there's a real strong correlation between a neighborhood school and their choice of where to live. Now, there's no doubt that we're seeing not only people moving into Sioux Falls that want to have their kids attend the Sioux Falls School District, there's also people that want to go to private schools or even open enroll in somewhere. But for the most part, there's always been a very strong correlation. And so as we look at the city of Sioux Falls and our future planning and growth management, we've always emphasized the push for neighborhood schools, so that if you take a typical square mile of residential development and you can project out how many housing units, and then from that we have a formula, whether it's single family or apartments, how many potential school kids will be coming out of that square mile, and you try to put a school within that attendance area. That's a very simplistic way that we can go about it. So we have a long-range comprehensive planning process that we've kind of mapped out where future potential elementary schools could be, or general areas, based on the projected residential growth areas. So the idea would be that you're within close proximity to an elementary school. Not so much for middle school or high school, but really more for the elementaries. But even for the high schools, Lincoln, Roosevelt, Washington, even O'Gorman to some degree, but let's say the 3 public schools are all in or near residential areas. Yes?
On that map that you got on the ground there, undeveloped land, the yellow boxes?
Yes.
What type of a time frame was that for the future developments, was how I understood those yellow boxes to be? I mean, are those like 10 years, 20 years?
Yeah, the yellow boxes that are the approved residential developments are probably in that 5 to 10 year. This other one that...
Yeah, it's that one there.
Yeah, that's probably more in that 10-year timeline.
Okay.
Because those are areas that are currently in the city limits. They've already been annexed, but they're still vacant for various reasons. But they're all within that 5 to 10 year time frame of when they'll probably get developed.
Okay.
Whether it's residential or industrial or whatever it might be.
So do you calculate that at a frequency level that matches the 5 year?
Yeah, we typically absorb about 400 acres of residential land each year and about 600 acres of overall development land each year. So we can see from year to year what the absorption rate's going to be and what the availability is to meet that absorption rate.
And so you have a 1 mile metric. What's the outer limits of that in order to keep up that kind of a neighborhood type school?
Well, that, in a perfect world, the school would be right in the middle of that 1 mile. We don't have a perfect.
Which world is that?
Yes. So again, in the old days, you'd say you're within 6 blocks walking distance, but since everybody drives to school for the most part, but that's kind of the theory, is that you're within that half a mile radius of an elementary school.
Let's take a 5-minute break and let Todd get more refreshments in there, and the rest of the will be a little sure.
Dave, look at that. Yes, nice to meet you. Yeah, we could both run together, but I blinked and you were ahead of me, running over to get a bike.
city. Boy, I need it. I will. We bust. A lot of kids in there.
Todd is the business manager for the school district, so now after you have your chips and your water, you're all refreshed for all the
Should have served. You don't want a cookie.
You have a microphone over there?
I gave you mine.
Mine had mayo, so I had to.
Yeah, was that it?
I'm like, that's ingenuity right there. That's perfect.
Tonight he's talking enrollment numbers. We're going to hear more from him at our next meeting on dollars and cents as well. But tonight is all about the need for students. So, Todd, take it away.
Thank you, Vernon. Yeah, I'm Todd Veek. I'm the business manager, and I've been here since 2001, so about 17 years. I think Dr. Maher showed this slide at the community engagement sessions, but this is our historical enrollment in the district going back to 1990. We were at 15,000 kids, a little over that. We've grown about 8,700 students since that time, and that would be the third largest school district in the state if it was its own district. And we're looking at growing about 1,000 more in the next 5 years, which I don't know what size district that would be, but it would definitely be in the top 30 in the state of our growth in the next 5 years. Here's some, I think this was also part of Dr. Maher's presentation. I'll just retouch on it. If you look at our current middle school enrollment, and then that's 3 grades, obviously, 6, 7, 8, and you compare that to the number of K through 2 students that are in the district right now, no projecting going on there. There's 478 more in K through 2 than there are in middle school. So we know those kids are going to be coming through the pipeline. We're going to have classrooms to put them in. And if you go a little bit further out and you compare our high school, which is 4 grades, 9 through 12, to K through 3, there's about 1,144 more students in K through 3 than are right now in high school. So roughly, we do a little bit more science on this, but roughly you can think of, we've got about 1,100 kids we're going to have to find spots for out in the district before they hit high school. So how do we project enrollments? We use, I think what's fairly common out there, cohort survival method. We look at, the easy way to describe it is, last year, how many kindergartners showed up in first grade this year? What percent was that? And all the way through, first to second, second to third, all the way to 12th. The tougher part, I guess the little bit that's tougher part is trying to project the kindergarten. And what we've used for years, going back to the late 80s, is we look at how many kids were born in Minnehaha County 6 years ago, and how many of those kids showed up in school today. And it runs in about 70% is what that is. And what we do is each year we adjust based on what's actually happening. So our method always self-corrects. If we're wrong, it looks at that. So we look at it 7 different ways, and I won't touch on all these. But the regular way, kind of the original way that we've gotten away from, was weighted average. You look at the last 4 years, and you weight the most recent year 4. You rate the 4th year prior. You rate that 1, and the other 2, 2, and 3, and you just plop that in, and you use that for all the different grades, and you say, yeah, what does that cohort survival look like? And that's how we would project. We have gotten into looking at, now it's 7 different ways. Second low is looking at of the 4, what's the second lowest for each of those? Each grade, we do that. The Olympic, which I didn't know was a thing, but it's in state statutes, so we use it here too. You drop the high and you drop the low, you use the middle two. The most conservative version is you just take the lowest of the 4. And we also took the bottom 3, the average of the bottom 3. We started doing that about 5 or 6 years ago. And then the, probably the best name of all, second most conservative, is you just take the two lowest and you take an average of those two. And it turns out that the conservative and the bottom three are the two lowest, and then the second conservative becomes the new second lowest because it's an average of those two. And that's the one we've been using for the last couple, 2 or 3 years. And so, how has that turned out for us? This is just going back to 2011. We didn't cherry pick. I just, with what was convenient, and looked at how we projected. And we're actually just looking at kind of that bottom line number there. What's the difference each year of how much we're off by? We were fairly pretty consistent. We had one bad year, 2014. We were off by 2.2%. We do when we get into the high school grades, we actually look at not what year they are in school academically, but how many years they've been in high school, and our data got a little fouled up on it that 1 year. And so we were off by 2.2% that year. But if you look at what our median's been back to 2011, we've been about 0.5%. And yeah, last year we were off by 3 students. So I don't know what we did. We celebrated. Yeah, right. We're shooting for 1 next year. So that's year to year. We look at all 7 of those, kind of look at which one we should have probably used, and then probably use that one for the next year. That's year to year. So what we wanted to do here is look at kind of a hindcast. If we'd used all 7 of these models way back when in 2013, what would have it shown for this year, since we know what this year is, and then what would each of these show if we restarted from this year and going forward. And the one we've been using most recently, the second most conservative, is the one actually that would have been the most accurate. It's the black line, the dark black line on there is the actual number, and then that purple line is the second most conservative, and it's within a couple hundred 5 years later. The one right above the black line, but that one's a little low, the second most conservative. The one right above the black line is what is now the third most conservative projection, and that one's fairly close as well. So then we just ran these all forward. And the one we're using, the one I'm going to show you today, is the second most conservative, since that is the one we find to be the most accurate year to year, and it's actually, if we could go back in time and run all these models, it'd be the one that's most accurate 5 years ago. So that's the way. And when I say I'm the business manager, so when I say 2018, I'm talking about the fiscal year, 2018 year. So it was actually fall of 17, but 17-18 school year. So we have historically, I mean, going back in that second year, that second most conservative is a pretty good indicator of, we think, what it'll look like the next 5 years.
Is that the bright pink line?
Pardon that?
Is that the bright pink line? Ours isn't in color.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the bright pink line is the second most conservative. It was a couple hundred, I think, short on where we were, but it's the closest. That blue line up there is what is now the third most conservative, and that's fairly close as well. But we ran it out, and we're running it. Is that green? What is the light green? Light green is the second is the third. It's the 3 low. This is the second low number. Yeah. This one right here.
Looks like that one and the gray one kind of hug each other, the bottom 3 and the second one.
Yeah. Now they all come back together because going forward we reprojected. So they don't all get more accurate right all of a sudden. We started over. Yeah, right. So we let them run since 2013, and then we started them over and saw what they would look like. There's a little more historical information. Population growth in the city of Sioux Falls from 2000 to 2018 has been an average 2.18% per year. In the Sioux Falls School District, it's been 1.33. And that's roughly, I think, 61% of that number. Can't read my writing, but I think 61% of that number is, and so we know we haven't kept up with the city because some of that growth is in Harrisburg School District and Brandon School District. But historically, we've been running at about that 61% number. And this next chart gets pretty busy, but so what we did is that now the green line here is that second most conservative. And then we ran that out, and that's the one we're projecting on. But then we kind of looked at, well, what if we miss? What if we're off? So we took the next two most accurate, which would be the most conservative number is that red line on below, and what we call the bottom three is the blue line above that. And so those percent growths in there would be, on the most conservative, that would be a 0.58% annual growth rate. The one we're using, second most conservative, would be 0.78. And then that bottom three, which is the third most conservative, but the least conservative of this group we chose to use, would be almost 1% a year. And if you look again at what the city has grown compared to what the school district has, the school district's growth rate has been 61% of what the city's growth rate has been. Using our second most conservative number, we're showing 50% of what the city's growth rate will be, is projected to be. So we're having that number even drop down a little bit more. If we were using the most, I would say, the largest growing line here, I'd say the most optimistic, I guess, if you think about this district growing, that would be more at that 60, that'd be at 64% growth rate of the city. So we're under that, we're at 50. We're under the historical average of what we've grown compared to the city. But what we've shown in the last 5 years, I think that's the number to use. And we are, as Dr. Maher pointed out at all the engagement sessions, we budget on that number. We budget expenses and we budget revenues on that number because we hire the number of teachers based on that, and our state aid, most of our state aid formula revenues comes off that number. So we want to be accurate on it. So that's the number. That's the number we're using going forward. So then, if we take Jeff's capacity numbers and put this growth pattern out to way out in the future, 2035, you can see. We actually show a little dip in our elementary projections for the next few years. But if you're wondering the birth rate in Minnehaha County is high in the last 4 years as it's ever been. I think Dr. Maher talked about this too in those engagement sessions if you were at any of those. But we go back, we have data going back to 88, kind of since we've been projecting this way, and we're by far at the highest 4 years of the birth rate since then. So those kids are going to be coming in down the road here, and so that we show that elementary enrollment picking up. And we put in there, and I know it gets busy in black and white because I'm looking at it in black and white too, but I think when you get out to 2027, 2028, you've got about 600 kids negative capacity out there. That's roughly a 4-section school. And if you get way out there to 2035, it's about 1,500 kids. That's 2.5 4-section schools. So that gets pretty far out there. But in the next 10 years or so, it looks like it for sure probably need another 4-section school. If you look at middle school, as Jeff pointed out, we're already over capacity. We have that little dip coming up in the mid-2020s because of we're also projecting our elementary enrollment to drop a little bit here for the next 2 or 3 years and then pick up. As you can see, we get out to about 990 short, way out on the far end, and about in 2022, and then again in 2028, we're talking about 600 or so kids short. So do you want, the question, I guess, is do you want 5 really big middle schools, or do you want 6, and maybe the 6th one isn't as big as some of the ones we have right now? But that's kind of what we're looking at in the middle school. Capacity. And then high school, that too, we're kind of already above capacity, especially if you're from out west, Roosevelt Way. They're way above capacity, but we show growth and then future growth. And this, because we're doing this cohort survival method, and this is our second most conservative projection, you won't see that 1,200 number show up because it's about 99.8% of the kids advance each year. You know what I mean? When you're using that, so when we use that second most conservative number, you're not quite getting 100% of the kids moving into the next grade. But that's kind of why we showed you that other range of what it possibly could be if we're low on our projections. And I think that was what I was supposed to go through today. I will say this, in response to some earlier questions, I'm going to try to answer a question before it gets asked, and then I'll sit down and we can take more later. But we sporadically, I guess, when we do planning, long-range facility planning, we look at the core of the school district and how many, we know, as Mike said, we know for kids attending the Sioux Falls schools where they live, not necessarily, I mean, we also know obviously where they attend, but where they live. And we, because there's about 4,000 kids that are open enrolled within the school district that live in the Sioux Falls School District, but they don't attend the school in the area that their home attendance area. And so we've watched that, and I'll just give you just a few years on this, but I'm looking at elementary in 1992. The 92-93 school year, 41% of the elementary students lived in the core of the city, and 59 were without it. And the core is defined roughly as, think of Maple Street, and you just pretend it just kept going from the west to the east. It would go right under the runways of the airport. That's the northern boundary. The western boundary is basically the big Sioux River where it intersects with there. And then the south and the east boundary is where 229 intersects with both of those. That's what we define as a core. And we plot the kids on a map and see how many live there. Okay, so again, in 92-93 in elementary, it was 41% in the core, 59 out. In middle school, it was 41 in the core, 59 out. And if you jump ahead to 2010, probably not a surprise, it had gone to only 30% or 31% elementary were in the core and 69 out. And in middle school, it was 31% in the core and 69% out, basically the same. However, this is maybe a surprise. In 2018, elementary, it hasn't changed, it stayed the same. So the core is, it's growing because the whole district's growing. So the core is growing as well, and so it was 31% elementary, and now it's 30.3. It was 30.8. So it's the last year was 2010, and now this is the FY10, the 2009-10 year, and then 8 years later, it's basically the same number. However, middle school, remember it was 31 and 69. Now it's 36 and a half and 63 and a half. So actually there's more middle school students attending Sioux Falls public schools that live in the core than did as a percent and as a raw number than did back in 2010. So we tend to think all the growth has been on the west side and maybe a bit on the east, or down in Harrisburg, the south, but the core is growing as well, you know, especially in that middle school age. And then because we are growing in elementary, we have more elementary kids now than we did in 2010. The core is growing in raw numbers too and holding its own as a percent of the elementary population.
So that speaks to what Katrina was talking about.
Yep. So I thought I'd answer that question before it maybe got asked again. But other than that, I think I've overstayed my time.
How many students in the district are open enrolling that don't live within the district?
We have, it's roughly 1,100 that come from out, but we have about 400 in the district that go out, so we're net about 700, somewhere in that area. Yeah. All, that's all, yeah.
Number changed much over the recent
The net number, no. I think both numbers creep up each year, so the net number's been about that number. More in the elementary, lower elementary grades and high school grades than middle school.
Todd, I don't remember who addressed in the community meeting, but boundary changes are not a solution to our what we're facing, correct?
Right, because that's these three last slides or charts we looked at. We show that we're over. We show that we're. We're going to back this up. Arrow up. Yeah. So elementary, you could say that maybe for a little while we could do some boundary changes, get by, stay under that dotted line, but in the future we're going to be over capacity district-wide. And middle school and high school we're already over capacity.
How do you project the move in, move out? I know you like projecting moving out.
Well, yeah, when we do that, I couldn't tell you if 80% of those kids were the ones that were here 2 years ago. We're just going off the net in and out, and that cohort survival doesn't necessarily say these 2,000 kindergarten kids, 1,600 of them showed up, plus another 399 into first grade. There's 2,000 here, and there's 1,990 the next year, and that, you know, honestly, I couldn't tell you if they all, well, I know they didn't, but if they all turned over and they're all new or not. We just, like I said, it self-corrects every year. In some grades, we go up, like when you change levels, you go from 8th to 9th, we tend to get more kids. And then maybe from elementary to middle, we might lose a few more than usual, but honestly, I couldn't tell you if what percent of the kids stay and how many of them are new.
Do you see the outside district boundaries changing much in the future? I know that used to be a commonplace where a developer would go in and do a new residential development. Do homeowners petition to have it moved into the Sioux Falls district from wherever it was, West Central or wherever?
Yep.
It seems like that was commonplace for a while, and now not so much.
It's commonplace in kind of the early 2000s,
Yeah.
and then well, the law's changed now, the last 3 years or so, where it can't happen. The only way that the boundaries can change now is if both school districts agree. It's kind of like what we did with West Central, Cherry, yeah. Yep, Cherry Lake Reserve, we brought in and we did a tax sharing agreement with them that phases out over time. That's based, either to be land swaps or something like that.
Unlikely to happen in the future, or
I wouldn't say impossible. No, I would say not extremely likely. Thanks.
Any other questions? All right. So our nearing the end here, what we need to talk about some of the
whether to replace or repair decisions, especially with Whittier and Cleveland, land acquisition for replacement schools, equity across the schools, projects to bring school to current district standards, projects due to establishment of new standards, security ADA issues. And in total, on the next page, you can see there's really $270 million of identified projects that we're going to have to figure out how to whittle down into a plan. So with that, is there any discussion or questions amongst the group after all the information you've heard? Jack.
And then just talk about the charge that we have. Are we trying to come up with a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan? Are we trying to look, or are we really trying to look way out? Just trying to address today's needs, or how far out are we trying to go?
Does anybody from the school district want to address that? He's asking, how far out are we looking? So do we want to look back at the growth projections and look at where those are at? I think it went out to 2025 or 2035. Are we looking at, I mean, that's a fair.
You want a 5-year plan from us? A 10-year plan? A 20-year plan?
That's a great question, and one that we haven't really truly said.
Dr. Maher, 1 minute. We have to pick you up.
Great question, and one that we haven't said, hey, we want it to be X number of years. So I looked quickly at Kent and Carly, and I said, 10 years? And I think they both said yes. Because I think if we just plan for right now, I think that's short-sighted. So I think what we would like to have in the end is a 10-year plan, a 10 years worth of marching orders, if you will.
And the bond issue would be a 20-year bond?
It can be whatever we want it to be. We've talked internally only about it potentially being a 20-year bond or a 25-year bond. And for those of you who aren't overly familiar with that, really what we're trying to do is what you're trying to figure out on your own home. What's the length of your mortgage? What are you comfortable with? 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, or some derivative in between there. That's yet to be determined, Jack. But I think if you think in that 20 to 25 year time frame, you're thinking as most of them run.
And the last bond issue we did, that was 20 years for Roosevelt?
The last bond issue was in 1997. And no, it wasn't for Roosevelt. It was actually for a number of things across the district. And I would say maybe what it really was for was equity. And that made sure that no matter where no matter what zip code you lived in, your kids were going to go to quality schools. Brick and mortar wasn't going to be the determination of where you sent your child. So it was more for equity amongst facilities than anything else. And by the way, that bond issue has been paid off.
And we have we done any bonding since then?
We have no bonded indebtedness from a bond issue. But sounds like that's
Our next meeting, we will cover the current status of those issues. It's good to bring them up today because we want to know what questions need to be answered. Cover what debt the district has. Zero capital outlay bond, right, Todd? Zero general obligation bond.
General obligation. Who wants a bonding lesson in the next meeting, a brief bonding lesson? I think that might be helpful too. So Todd, we're tasking you with that.
And for
can I have one more other question? It seems like there's immediate issues and then there's 10-year issues. Yes, okay.
That's good. So for tonight, are we all on the same page that the need, are you seeing that the need is with the capacity of our existing facilities in light of growing enrollment? Have we diagnosed the issue fairly? I'm seeing, I mean, is there any dissension that that's not an issue for the school district?
Not a dissension, but the big question is everyone has had their individual assumptions, planning assumptions. It would be nice to have a consolidated view of everybody's planning assumptions so we can either say, yes, that makes sense, or that, no, that doesn't. and how it changes over that 5 to 10 to 15-year or 10-plus timeframe.
Good, because okay, excellent. So our next meeting, we'll be looking at our district resources and potential resources, so going back to that bonding 101, and then we'll start looking at those initial space solutions.
Critical assumptions, yeah.
And then our third meeting, between the third meeting and the fourth meeting, a report will be developed. It will be brought back to our group so that we can do the fine-tuning of that report before it's presented to the board, the school board. Is there any information that wasn't made available tonight that would be worthwhile to look at our next meeting? Theron?
Well, I think Sharon brought it up earlier. Sharon brought it up earlier, and I don't know, maybe Rich, this is what you're getting at, but the consolidated view, kind of the overlay of the 3 different maps, the census data, and the school district enrollment projections in a consolidated view. Is that kind of what you were touching on?
Pretty much.
Okay. I wasn't sure if I was just going to repeat what you said.
To the next level of feedback.
And then also, I would like to see maybe a comparison of what other cities, maybe in our same growth situation, growth rate, size, demographics, some things, just something that other cities are doing that's working well.
What about a comparison to our neighboring districts, where we're at in terms of indebtedness,
Tax, where we're at with taxes, is that valuable to the group too?
Yes.
Todd, can you provide
How much did they
that?
go into debt?
Okay.
Angela, and your mic is right next to you.
Just 2 items. One of them is very simple and straightforward, but the multi-housing data that Mike mentioned, he said that it's very similar to the owner-occupied homes, but if you could provide that multi-housing, I think I'd appreciate seeing it. And then the other one is the legislation determining what can be spent in terms of capital outlay, the changes that happened in Pier. I'm familiar with that, but I'd like to be more familiar with that, and I imagine others here in this room would as well.
I have one other question. Is the consensus of the people who presented to us, is there a best-in-class target that is nationwide that we can picture what we may try to emulate? Is there something that anyone knows? Where would we go if we wanted experts that have this planning down cold and
similar to what Sharon said, Dr. Maher, can you provide something like that? Peer cities? I know in city government, Mark, what are our peer cities that we look at?
Regionally, Lincoln, Des Moines, Fargo, those are probably near term, and then based on the issue that we're looking at, we may go farther or may go closer, whether it's transportation or utilities.
If those communities are doing well.
That's right. And I think part of it for me is it's, I'm hearing some new terms tonight where is it a 4-section elementary is what we consider as the ideal, what's an ideal middle school, and then I thought there was some really good feedback at the Lincoln Engagement Centers. What's the ideal high school? We heard, we have settled in here, I think, at 1,800. Is that our right plan going forward? So I think, Rich, to your point is some of the key assumptions, whether they're at 90% capacity or 85, and Jeff and I had a good sidebar to kind of catch me up on that, but just those basics, if this group fundamentally says, yes, we support a 4-section elementary, then I think that helps us understand when that next one is. At least the data today shows me that our near-term issue is high school, then it's middle school, and then it becomes elementary. But as we look at funding it, we're likely going to have to look at, maybe how those all layer up. So anyway, I feel like I have a lot of catching up to do. I've heard a lot of good data tonight. Appreciate all the input.
Just to echo off of that, what Mark was saying, on the capacity factors example projection, they had students per classroom at 24.3, but then and this is at the elementary school level, but the class size reduction at 18.9. Is that a target goal to reduce classroom size at the elementary level?
Maybe we can have an explanation of what class size reduction classrooms are. Because there are 12 classrooms per stage, so maybe if we could hear from someone from the
Good evening. Teresa Boyson, Assistant Superintendent, but elementary principal for a long time. So class size reduction, we have class size reduction in our title buildings, and they have that, they get to determine whether they want that at kindergarten or first grade. And they have the teachers allocated to them for that class size reduction. So in those buildings, the goal for class size reduction is to have about 18 students. But that fluctuates because today I might have 18 students, but tomorrow I might have 10 kids come and enroll in my buildings. And so that number fluctuates by building, and then they decide which grade level is best for them. So we have it in some buildings, but not in.
In class size reduction, you pull, they kind of have a home classroom, is that correct?
That is their home classroom.
It is, okay, so they're not just pulled out for math or reading or?
No, that is their home classroom.
Yes.
So that is their target, their home room for them. At home.
Well, the other thing, Vernon, is that when we're looking into the future, we want to look at architecturally different space, not just a classroom size, but what kind of spaces we need for the kind of programming and engaging activities that we have kids doing now.
And that was one of the things in the solutions when Ann was talking and reading through the solution at the beginning, and just asking something about the expansion and contraction. Are we talking of modular construction where buildings, not the sense of like modular structures outside, but where the building can actually be expanded, contracted in a way, the physical structure itself? I don't know when that's going to be presented to the group, so we can start thinking about that if we're just have 3 more sessions after this to come up with a solution.
It sort of goes back to what is trend in education, not that we want trendy, but what are the best practices?
Right.
Other districts.
It leads me to ask the question then about programming, because if we're going to design buildings, as Diane was saying, we need to understand also what kind of programming is going to happen in those buildings so that those buildings meet the needs of students. So to build a facility without understanding what's going to happen in the building seems short-sighted for us to move forward. So that might be something that I'd like to hear about next meeting. What type of programming are we looking at in the future or dreaming about in the future so that we can then construct a building that can accommodate that?
These are all great, and we have plenty of time. Cathy?
Is the intent to get information out to us prior to the next meeting so we can take a cursory view of it and formulate some questions? Because I think that could be really helpful in expediting some of the information.
Sure. You have a 3-ring binder in front of you to take that along, and we'll work with Deanne because we're here to serve you. So if that's something that you need to inform your decision making, we want to make sure that you have that material. So I know Vernon's been writing some of this down. I think I saw Dr. Boyson writing it down. Deanne, right, so we have help in getting that information out to you.
The other thing, the top 3 things you want in homework before our next meeting, what information you want? Cathy, you have the top?
Say, Vernon, while they're thinking about that, one thing I wanted to remind and encourage all of you is that Deanne sent out the feedback that we had gotten from the listening sessions. There was a lot of feedback, which is great, and that's part of our charge and responsibility. We went out to solicit comments and questions from stakeholders, and now it's our responsibility as task force members to genuinely sit down and call through those feedback cards. So I promise to do that, and I hope you all do too.
Just briefly through it. Some of the themes I saw today, and please disagree or add to it, but some of the things people talked about were, should we be looking at
Year-round schools? How much online should we be doing? The ideal size of the classes, which we've talked about wanting to know more of. Busing to locations. There was discussion, lots of discussion about how the district should be planning further out in time. And that if there's a feeling that we're short on time here, and I think all of us feel that pressure. And then the tax comparison to other districts, which we've jotted down here. Were there other themes that you saw?
Environmental design for the future.
Okay. And
Desire for creative, having schools they become their own community area.
mm-hmm.
About them being so big.
So of the items that we've jotted down to address next time, Cathy, since you're holding the mic, I suggested that, pressure's on you. What top 3 things do you want to see before the next meeting that we can feed to you?
I'll give one. Certainly, what other best-in-class schools are doing. Because
Okay.
I really want some education around that and be able to, I think that'll help us formulate questions and ideas as we come prepared to the next meeting and get more information.
And that should be easy information to get to. What next? Who else wants to throw out something that we can get before Katrina?
I'm just curious
With the Whittier and Cleveland agenda items for next time, will we have a report about here's all the things that need to be updated and or fixed in these 2 facilities, or what is that presentation going to be like, and is there just pre-homework we can do for that?
I'm the only one who was surprised by the Whittier Cleveland thing being on here so prominently. I was. Okay.
And who wants tours of those buildings? We've talked about optional tours as well. Raise your hand if that's of value to you. It looks like most everyone. So Jeff, can you coordinate that? One idea I had for tours, what if we made those schools available at in our next meeting at 4 o'clock so we can get back here by 5:30? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Jeff, does that work?
You kind of won't get both of them, but you might get Whittier or whichever one you want to see.
Or do we go earlier so we could do both?
Could you split the groups?
Yeah, you gotta wait for school.
Yes, we could split the groups and we could at least talk about it.
Okay, we'll figure that out and email you how that will work.
Could Todd share the information about the very interesting statistics about the changes to the core that you were reading and that I don't think were included from 1993 to the present?
Yeah, it's sporadic. We don't do it every year, but I can do that.
It would be very helpful as we're talking about this decentralization issue to see.
I think relating to everything we're saying, asking about more information and relating to, I think Cathy and I had actually talked about this at one of the community input meetings. Is there somewhere we can have a central clearinghouse of information where we can ask, someone we can email or something, website, something that we can, that's fluid. I mean, that is a changeable, dynamic thing.
We can all see it.
Yes, right.
Yeah. There is a spot. There is a spot on the district's website. District's website is sf.k12.sd.us. I'll repeat, sf.k12.sd.us.
You can email that to us, right?
Yes, I can certainly do that. That's in our packaging. Yes, it is. And there's a facilities planning section, top left icon, that has materials in it, and all the materials we're presenting to the public. We want to, be very transparent and put all of that information out there.
if that's a location that would be easily accessible, because I know not everybody does Google Docs and all of those other things, we'll just put everything there, if that's agreeable. There's no reason that we couldn't put the information out there that we're speaking of, correct? Couldn't be any reason.
And how is that information going to be limited to the public? Because in the comments that you shared with us, there was a lot of requests of keeping this in open dialogue so people feel like they are vested in the process and have a say and will vote.
Yeah. Go ahead. And Kathy, it's not okay. I don't know. I just put the battery. Or which one did I put battery?
Kathy, the public has been invited to any of our meetings, and while they're here, I don't see, but if anybody from the public does come, every single session, we will have time for them to offer up questions to our group. And I guess if we have the website for them to access to see the information going.
There is a question corner on the facilities section of the website also, so anyone who has a question about anything that they're reading, that is through a Google form. It will come to my inbox and I will disperse it, whether it's an enrollment question, a curriculum question, what have you. So, you know, certainly if you have a question, that's a great place to go to. If you haven't thought of something tonight but you think of it later, the public as well will push it out on social media. We have a really good Facebook and Twitter following. Of course, that doesn't reach everybody. I was hoping there'd be a little more media attention tonight. Apparently, we're preparing for the next snowstorm, though.
A quick governance piece to address when we talk about the public. We have with us a school board member, and so our role as a task force is not to hinder the relationship that the constituents have with their respected school board member. So it's just something for us to keep in mind. If we're getting individual questions, that they're welcome to come, but that they also have a school board representative to help address some of those questions as well. So.
May I just offer an alternate? You know, I think the tours would be great. I don't know how efficient it's going to be with the timing that we have, and so with Jeff and his background and floor plans, is there any way we could actually look at a lot of that here and have him take us through the floor plans of Whittier? And there can be, if there's some serious ADA challenges, to put in the presentation a picture or two, and then we can maybe go to one of the newest schools that has been designed, and what's new in that architecture, make them more environmentally friendly, and then potentially some of those core elementaries like Eugene that potentially have the ability to be renovated. And so to me, I'm just trying to think about I think it'd be great if we all had time to go through 6 or 7 schools, but in our time frame, I think it may be really short. And if that option is available, that's great. But I would just maybe challenge Jeff and just have him have some contemplated thought about how could he kind of catch us up on kind of what he deals with. And ultimately, we've got some really old schools. We've got a school here that's in 1934. We've also got a brand new school in 2016. And at least I think we could maybe really kind of utilize about an hour of time and really catch us up on some of the opportunities, but also some of the challenges.
So I'm going to go ahead, Angela.
Yeah, I've just got a question that relates really closely to what you just said. 1997, I'm one of the people in my head, I think of that as Roosevelt. Dr. Maher just corrected and said it was Roosevelt, but it was also to create equity amongst the schools. I'm curious, what did that 1997 equity amongst the schools charge look like? I'm curious, was that achieved 100%? Was that achieved 80%? And the reason why I'm asking is I know 1997 was a long time ago, but I'm curious about how much of our challenge of creating better equity amongst the schools, how much of that is new and new standards, and how much of that is carryover from 1997, and what could we learn, if it is carryover, what could we learn to be more complete today?
Did you want somebody to touch on that briefly?
I'd love it. If we've got a minute for it, I'd really be interested.
But thank you for the question.
When you asked it, I thought it was more rhetorical for tonight than it is.
Yeah, you did.
But I think it's a great question, and I think maybe that should be part of our information for the next meeting. Maybe to just talk about what happened in 1997 that we're still seeing the benefit from today. Maybe that would be part of our next program.
Okay, so to wrap it up, I'm going to go through, I have 5 things down here. It's so fun as a designing educator.
The first one goes to Dr. Maher. The best-in-class schools, Dr. Maher, we'd ask that you provide that, your vision for what that might look like that we can read before our next meeting. Jeff, we're going to task you with the Whittier-Cleveland needs. Included in that, potential optional tours, but also the floor plan idea that Mark Cotter suggested. Todd, we're going to assign you the current debt, and we'll discuss that at the next meeting as well, but you also have the tax rate for the surrounding school districts, I believe, that you could send out to everyone easily. And then Mike Cooper, I'm assigning city work here to the consolidated map that was addressed. Does that sound like a good amount of reading before our next meeting? Does that meet our most immediate needs, in addition to the agenda items that we've set up for next time?
Sounds great.
We had some people from the public earlier, but they have left, so we're assuming they were satisfied with their questions. Well, we really appreciate your time tonight. This is a big commitment, but it is a delightful challenge, as Dr. Maher says. Thank you for being here.